Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, amma ba'd. So we're going to continue a little bit with the different hikam, and we're going to get to now we're on the chapter of patience through in the times of adversity. So the first hikam that AtaIllah says is إذا فتح لك وجهة من التعرف فلا تبالي معها إن قل عملك فإنه ما فتح لك إلا وهو يريد أن يتعرف إليه ألم تعلم أن التعرف هو موردها عليه والأعمال أنت مهديها إليه وأينما تهديه إليه مما هو مريده عليه. He says if he opens a door for you by making himself known to you, then don't pay any heed or don't mind that your deeds don't measure up to his giving you the ability to know him. Because if he had not opened it for you, or the only reason he has opened it up for you, is this desire for you to get to know him. And he says, do you not know that he is the one who presented the knowledge of himself to you? And if he's presenting the knowledge of himself to you, you are presenting, what are you presenting? You're presenting him with your deed. So how big of a difference is between what you're presenting to him and what he is presenting to you? So when I first read this, I was like, okay, how does this relate to the chapter heading? Allah is mentioning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you this knowledge of getting to know him. And we are presenting our deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does that have to do really with patience through adversity? So as we break down some of the words linguistically and we go through some of the commentary, inshallah, it'll start to make sense. The word fataha, we all know what this means. It means to open, to facilitate, to make a particular way for someone out of something into something. And in this particular case, especially when the word fatah is used in the text of spirituality, it's about this opening that an individual gets in their heart that allows them to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This opening of their breast, this opening of this understanding. This fath happens, and it's in what we realize, even from the word itself, that it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not really through the seeker's own efforts that this happens, but it truly just happens from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there's wijhatan min at-ta'aruf. It's this direction or this doorway for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make himself known to something. And this again is always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's initiative. We're going to have some discussion on this specific phrase that comes to the end, muridahu alayk wa muhdiha ilayk. So basically this is this asymmetrical grammatical phrase that he's put into place, where the muridahu, it's continuous, it's inexhaustible, it's this nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving and putting onto an individual. This muhdiha ilayk is what our deeds and things that are finite are representing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This discussion will come up inshallah. So now, the whole purpose of this journey that Ibn Ta'ala is trying to highlight through all of his hikam is that an individual gets to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the things that we recognize and we do, we're fasting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're trying to fulfill our ayat for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in the Hadith Qudsi that I draw nearer to my servant through the fara'id. Then after that, the voluntary actions and deeds to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until he becomes beloved to me. So we realize that if we're doing these good deeds, we're trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're trying to fulfill the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our goal is we're trying to attain this love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're trying to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that is one way to do so. One way is we put all of our efforts and energy into doing good deeds for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now this hikam, what it's saying is, this individual, he is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's working towards getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then something happens to this person. Whether it is a sickness, a calamity, some issue that happens in their personal life, some issue that happens in their work life, that they can no longer continue to do the same level of deeds that they used to. Maybe they were doing a lot of fasting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then they get sick and then they can't fast as much anymore. Maybe they were praying tahajjud every night, but then now their body becomes weak, or they get some specific disease related to their sleep, and now they can't wake up for tahajjud regularly anymore. Maybe they were studying but then because of their certain responsibilities that came upon them that are rightful to them, they were no longer able to study as much as they would have liked to. So these are specifically related to the person who is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is working towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, putting all of their energy into learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then something happens and they can no longer do so. So what Ibn AtaIllah is saying is an individual might start to think at this point, what happened? I was doing everything possible for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I was trying my best. I was trying to study things. I was trying to pray tahajjud. I was trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now just put me into this situation that I can no longer do this? And he's saying, actually, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending down His mercy for you to try to get to now know Him. There's two ways to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first one we talked about, doing good deeds, doing as much as possible, doing extra ibadah. The second is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us through a certain difficulty in our life that becomes the shortcut to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That becomes this path that directly takes us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the reframing that Ibn AtaIllah is doing and the other commentators are doing for this specific hikam, and it translates over to all the other ones as well. He sets up, that's why in the beginning he sets up this scene. He starts off with this scene is that an individual, he's clarifying this state, that this individual is somebody who's actively trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then rather than have this experience or this feeling that I'm no longer good enough, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has abandoned me now. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do this now? Having these thoughts, the mind is supposed to be reframed to think that actually, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving to me. He's putting me in this situation because He loves me so much. He doesn't care how many deeds I do. Because the quantity of your deeds no longer matter. He doesn't care that you're excessively fasting or not. He says, I'm putting you in this difficulty. I recognize what that difficulty leads to deficiency, and I'm going to make that a means for you to come directly to me, to build this deep connection with me. So now, if you had, we always seek shortcuts in life. We're always trying to find, how can I get from point A to point B, like we've talked about before, and just immediately skip. This is one shortcut that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in. But the issue is that we don't always recognize it as a shortcut. If the function of all of our deeds was to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that was the purpose of the way we do our deeds that we're doing, any action of good or sadaqah that we're doing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if our desire was to actually get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to love us, for us to know Him, then shouldn't we ask or shouldn't we look at the one who we're trying to attain the love of? How would you want that to happen, Ya Allah? How can I actually attain your love? And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is deciding who He puts His love on, then He can give it to us at any moment, and He's giving us this shortcut and saying this is actually the easier path to get to know. So now one thing that's mentioned about our deeds, and this comes into this muhdidahu alayk and this muhdidahu alayk. So basically, this muhdidahu ilayk is our deeds that we're presenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many of us here can guarantee that one of our deeds has been accepted? Can anyone guarantee that any of our deeds have been accepted? Can we guarantee that any of our deeds that we're presenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sincere? Can we say that any of our deeds that we're doing were not filled with pride or ego or for some love of other people? Every single one of our deeds is deficient. All of them are deficient. If we put all of our deeds together, they would all be deficient. So that's what the scholars say in this commentary is that, you look at what you're presenting to Allah. You are presenting this weak, feeble effort to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to put something before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's riddled with all of these other issues. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I see you. I see you're trying to get close to me. So now I'm going to actually give you some trial. I'm going to make it a little bit harder for you to study deen. I'm going to make it a little bit harder for you to fast. I'm going to make it a little bit harder for you to do whatever it is that you were doing before. And then how are you going to respond to that? And so what happens is people in the beginning of their spiritual journey, they get very excited and they do a lot. Somebody who first starts getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're fasting a lot, reading Quran a lot. They feel like they're on cloud 9. This happens for some people in college. They drastically transform their life from what they used to be. They get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they really want to just do all the deeds that are possible. Then as they get a little bit older, either sickness comes, or they get life responsibilities comes in the way, or some crisis happens into their life, and then they can no longer do those same things as they used to be able to do. And so Ibn AtaIllah is reframing there as well, that also all of those things that we have these responsibilities for, they're also something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us to say, okay, can you be patient with your spouse? Can you be patient with your kids? Can you be patient with the difficulties of trying to provide a living for you and your family? Can you be patient with the arguments that you're going to have as you get older with your parents, with your spouses, with your siblings, with your community members? Are you able to handle that? And if you're able to handle those specific difficulties, that's your shortcut to me. That's the easy path for me. So rather than an individual thinking, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cutting me off from the spiritual path? Is He just saying that, I'm no longer good enough to be a pious servant of His? When rather, it's not that we're being cut off from the spiritual path, is that the spiritual path is actually being made easy for us. But we don't think of tests as a shortcut, because at the moment that actually happens, it's painful. It hurts. And some of this is, inshallah, mentioned in the other hikam that we'll talk about. Shaykh Yahya and Shaykh Abdul Rahman Mangera, both of them talk about this concept of this ta'arrufat al-jalaliyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, in His names, He has these jalali names and jamali names. When it comes to His jamali names, these are things that His rahmah, His love, He's the provider. And when we get all of these things, we get really happy and excited and like, yeah, Allah loves us. You get something, you've been working hard towards something, and also that gives you the degree you want, the career you want, the house you want, the family you want. You get it and you're just really happy. That Allah gave you all of these things and you're grateful to Allah. Yeah, you're like, Allah loves me. But then the moment some difficulty happens, you don't get the house that you want. You don't get the job that you want. You don't get the promotion that you want. You are having maybe some issues raising your kids. And you're like, why is this happening now? What is the reason for this? So that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends us with His jalali characteristics, those are also a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We recognize the jamali characteristics as beautiful. We recognize them as being a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what He's saying is actually the jalali characteristics are also a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the thing they talk about is, so for example, say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restricts or withholds something from you. If the response to that is say, Ya Allah, you own everything anyways, and we humble ourselves before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows some type of way that it is not necessarily entirely constrictive, but you feel hurt by it. Some tests happened, you're not sure what to do, you're a little bit confused, and the path keeps getting blocked. Those are all opportunities that we turn back and act in the opposite way, that we try to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So talk about this qabd and this bast. That if something becomes more constricted to you, you expand your heart in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah, you own everything anyways. You are the one who is in control. I just submit my entire self to you. There are two stories that's mentioned. One is Abu al-Khiyar and another was Muhammad al-Asfanji. Both of them had leprosy. Abu al-Khiyar, he was a Sicilian, he lived in Baghdad. And what happens is he would go in the street and you would see all the signs of leprosy on him, the boils and everything else. And generally when somebody has this disease, the smell isn't great when you're around them. It's like necrotic flesh to some degree and it just doesn't smell great. But for them, as he was walking around, they would say there would be this sweet musk that would come out of him. And it was because he had kind of recognized that this was a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they mentioned many different karamat, many different miracles that would happen that you could claim that people talk about that he was amongst the awliya. The other person, Muhammad al-Asfanji, he was similar, he had leprosy. And when somebody once told him, they said, it seems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't find any more of His enemies to test, and He tested you with this one of His close friends instead. And he says, don't ever say that. Don't you ever say that. Because you will notice that there will be people who are the leader of the awliya, the people who are supposed to be in these positions of piety, and you see them being tested with so much. He mentions basically they're living in a cave. They have maybe less provisions. They have nothing to do. They're riddled with sickness. And you'll see all of those people who are going through so much difficulty, but in the middle of the night they're just happy and content with their Lord. They're happy and they're content with their Lord because they recognize that all of that is actually the jalali characteristics Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting on them. That sickness, that disease, the pain, all of that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is actually elevating them in the ranks of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they feel that. And once you experience that level with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all of everything else becomes nothing. the magnitude of this hadith in Tirmidhi, the magnitude of reward is proportionate to the magnitude of the trial. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the people, He afflicts them. And whoever from these tests, if they have this contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they accept the test, that's happening to them, they see it, they believe it, they see it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes content and happy with that person. But if an individual fights that test, is resentful towards that test, asks, why is this happening to me? This is not fair. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts their this disappointment or this displeasure upon this person. There was a person one time who was trying to get into a specific residency, and they needed at the time the step was still score based, and they're taking this exam, they get their step score back, and it's not good enough to get into that residency. And the person just went a totally opposite degree, very quickly flipped and saying, this is not fair. This is what I've wanted my entire life. I've been working towards this my entire life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give it to me. How could He do that to me? Why did He do that to me? And for many, many months, almost even over a year, he was in this state, not sure if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was actually real because of this one specific incident in his life. And rather than recognizing what Imam Ta'ala is saying here, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually that was the test for that person to get the shortcut to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the idea is that we expect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, whatever I want, you will give it to me. If I make this dua, you'll give it to me. But when it comes to our trials and our tests, the very thing that we want in this life the most, that is the one thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test us with the most. If an individual really wants to be a certain career, He'll test you with that. For certain people, the main thing they want in their life, they want to get married, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test them in the difficulty in getting married. And I even take it this way, some people want to study deen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's the only thing they want in their life is to study deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make that path really difficult for them. To see, why are you doing it? Why are you doing this in the first place? Are you doing it because because the goal was to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to recognize that we're His abd? Do we see that? If you see that, then when you get deprived of something, then you recognize that it's okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala got my back. I know He's going to test me. And so actually this takes us to the next hikam, but just to kind of round up this specific hikmah. So the first thing is, when we see our deeds being reduced, when we see that our actions, the good deeds that we're trying to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become reduced because of a sickness, because of something being withheld from us, because some increase in responsibility, we don't take that as a means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is cutting me off spiritually. We reframe that to say, okay, these are the tests Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me, and I need to be patient through that, but I still continue to do as much as I can. It's not the lazy attitude of like, okay, well, I'm too busy, I can't do it. I try to do still with ihsan to the best of my ability in the best way possible, but recognize that my deficiencies lack. And you can't compare yourself to other people. You can't compare your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with somebody else's journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There may be somebody who's fasting, praying, doing way more than you are, but maybe in a very difficult situation than you are. That doesn't mean you strive for that, but you don't compare, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this person so pious, and why did He not make me be able to fast? Like, it's not Allah's fault that happened. This is His rahmah that He's putting to see why you're truly doing it. This next aspect is this, we didn't really specifically say this, tahabbub, but we kind of talked about it, that the nafil deeds that bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we recognize that none of our deeds that we know are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have no idea. We don't know if one of our deeds is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So rather than being we should try to do as many good deeds as we can, but rather than being so focused on the deeds we can't do, we should really be heavily focused on the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us and be ready so that they can be a way for us to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this next hikmah is لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار ما دمت في هذه الدار فإنها ما أبرزت إلا ما هو مستحق وصفها وواجب نعتها. So long as you are in this world, don't be surprised, don't get amazed, don't get shocked that the existence of sorrows, at the existence of problems. Because what's truly being manifested is nothing but what is the nature of the world in itself. So what he's saying, this starts with this word, لا تستغرب. Don't think it's a problem. Don't think it is abnormal. Don't think it is strange. Don't be shocked or surprised that you're going through difficulties in life. People say this, right? It seems like I'm always being tested in my life. Why is it that every single day there's something else? Why is it that every single week or year I'm being tested with so many different things? He's saying, don't be surprised by that, because that's actually the nature of the dunya. This word aqdar, it's this sorrows, these tribulations. The real meaning of this aqdar or qadar or qadar and kudura, that word specifically, it's this muddiness or this cloudiness that an individual feels in their heart when they go through a problem, that you just don't know what you're supposed to do. You're just a little confused. How am I supposed to navigate this problem in the first place? That little confusion, that muddiness that you feel in your heart, that is what is being referred to. Don't be surprised that that's happening to you in your life. Then he says that actually, the hikam, the next specific word is mustahaq wasfiha wa wajib na'tiha. That the world, it's not malfunctioning when you go through problems. The whole purpose of the way or the reason why the dunya is designed is that we're going to go through problems, difficulties, and tests. So he's saying this is just how the dunya has been created. So if the first hikam, it was talking about the seeker facing this adversity that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this one is addressing that actually the adversity that's coming is part of the nature of the dunya. So once we are able to understand this framework of the tests that come into our life, that actually the dunya is meant to be this way, then life becomes a lot easier. One of the examples that's given, or there's two examples that are given in the commentary. One is about a hospital. The purpose of a hospital is to admit patients into the hospital. Would you be surprised if someone comes in sick and has to be admitted to the hospital? Not really. I mean, that's why they're coming to the hospital. The surprise would be if no one is coming to the hospital to be admitted. Those are days that you're like, wow, like I don't have anything to do. It's like a light day. So he's saying the actual purpose of why something was created. If you know you're walking by a path and you know this specific house you walk by has a dog and it's going to bark every time you pass by, the first time you walk by, you're going to get scared. You're like, whoa, what's going on? Is it going to come after me? But the second, third, fourth time, you're like, oh yeah, I know the house has a dog. They start barking. You just keep going through it. It doesn't bother you anymore. And then the other example they give is with turbulence on an airplane. And this signifies the different variations of people in the world. If you're on an airplane and it's your first time going on an airplane and you face turbulence, you're freaking out. Like you start making all your du'as, people are scared, they're looking outside, what's going on, what's something going to happen? But then you look at the person who is a seasoned pilot, and they recognize the part of my job is to fly. Turbulence is a part of flying being on a plane. It's going to be a part of the process. They don't get scared. They're not looking around. They're just calm through the entirety of the turbulence and get out. And then there are varying levels of people all throughout the plane. Some people get more scared. Some people get less scared. So basically the question comes up then, who or what are you? What are us? Are we people that as soon as a test or difficulty comes into our life, we immediately start panicking and worrying, what's going on? What am I supposed to do? Our deeds decrease. I can't go to the masjid anymore. I have to take care of this. I can't read my Quran today because of this reason. And we totally get very flustered. So the thing that's mentioned here is that this paradigm change, this change in the framework and the mindset has to happen into an individual, that they start thinking to themselves, all right, I'm ready. Where's the test? Where's the test that's going to come in my life? I know that I just have to be ready to accept it. That doesn't mean you're ready to handle it. That doesn't mean you're ready to fully understand and go through the test that's going to come into your life, but you're ready to take it in and recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing this for a reason, and you're willing to accept that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what AtaIllah is doing, he's actually preparing us. He's preparing us and saying that these trials, these tribulations, are a natural manifestation of what this dunya has been created for. Shaykh Abdurrahman Mangera, he gives us a few different practical tips. How do we actually use this hikmah to grow as individuals? So the first one, he says the first thing you have to do is you have to spend a decent amount of time daily hammering in this concept in your mind, repeatedly in your heart, that the dunya was created to test me, and you reflect on the nature of the dunya. You spend some time reflecting on the nature of the dunya. That Actually, the money that I have, it can go away at any moment. The house and the comfort that I have, it can go away any moment. The life that I'm living and I have food at the table, it can go away at any moment. I don't deserve this, nor did I do anything to get this. Everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He decides whether it's there or it's not there. Then He says that if you do this consistently, it'll change the way that you view the world. When we get faced with the test, the reason why we have this panic, the reason why we have this anxiety is because that heart is not ready yet. And if we haven't prepared it previously, the next time we're faced with the test, it's going to be the same problem. The reaction to the test is not necessarily logical, it's emotional, and it comes from the heart. So if your heart is not prepared to receive that test, then the response is still going to be the same, that why is this happening to me? And no matter how strong our technical iman may be, if that heart isn't ready to accept that, then that iman can also get questioned. So the purpose is we have to build that barrier around our heart. But one of the biggest issues in society today, and actually it happened in the time of Imam Ghazali as well, he mentions in the Ihya, we just don't have time to sit still. We don't have time to sit and think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have time to sit and actually, what Imam Shaykh Abdul Rahman Gara said, and the first thing we should do is we sit and we think about our life in the dunya and what the dunya is. How many of us have time to do that? How many of us recognize that it is actually something important that I need to put my time to be able to do? And one of our teachers would say that if I want to get something done, I'm not going to ask the person who's free, who has a lot of time on their hands. I'm going to ask the person who's really busy. Because the person who's really busy, they will prioritize that time and they will recognize if this is important to them and they say yes, they will build out the time in their schedule to do it and know that it's important. When somebody gets really excited about exercise or their diet or something or an exam that's coming up, we're heavily focused on that. And we recognize that, if I want to lose this weight, if I want to get into shape, I need to work out this much, and nothing can stop them. This time, nobody could bother them. That's their time to work out. 10 to 15 minutes a day, can we give that just to reflect on what the dunya, even 5 minutes, even just driving from your car to your work or your school. Any of those moments are opportunities to reflect on the dunya. The second is to actively prepare for the trial. So after you recognize that this dunya is a space for tribulation and for a test, then you just know that the next one is coming. You prepare your heart mentally for what's coming. Why this becomes difficult is because we particularly have gotten used to a life of comfort. We've gotten used to when I want to eat something, I'll eat it. I'll DoorDash it. I'll buy it from the store. If I want a certain type of chips, I can buy whatever one I want. If I want a certain flavor of chips, if I want a certain type of food, if I want a burger, if I want a Philly steak, whatever it is, we just know that we can just buy it whenever we want. We can get it whenever we want. We know that if I want to go to sleep, I have a comfortable bed to go to sleep to. If that really any single major comfort we can think of in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it to us. So the moment there's some difficult thing we have to do, we can't do it. It's a huge barrier to cross. So how do we actually do this? How do we prepare our heart? Is we should try to pick things that are difficult every day. Something that's difficult every day. Something small that's difficult every day. I really want to eat this. I really want this specific type of food or a burger or something else. You tell yourself, I'm not going to eat it. Because my nafs wants it, I'm purposefully not going to get it. And I'll get it later if I want to. But right now, I'm going to protect myself from getting it because you get used to doing things that are against what you want from your life. And when you're able to do that, then when the bigger trials come into your life, you're able to handle that a lot better. You're able to take care of that a lot better because your heart has increased in its capacity. And then so this comes to the third thing is that learn at the minimum, learn to be patient with the test and not complain about it. At the minimum, whenever we're faced with a difficulty, this immediate stop should happen in our mind and say, I know this is hard, I know this is painful, but I know this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He'll take care of me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَالنَّقْصِ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. And so if you look at this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this double emphasis, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, that we are surely, absolutely, no doubt going to test you. We're going to test you with fear, in hunger, your wealth, and decreasing in your wealth, and yourself. And then what he says, and also glad tidings. bashir, give good news to those who are patient. So what he's saying is actually emphasizing this is the hikam is emphasizing this ayah, is expanding on this specific ayah, that all of the things that are happening into our life that we feel are a test, that's supposed to happen. But if the minimum, if we can just remain patient through that test, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the ayah, He's saying glad tidings to you. Good news. Junaid al-Baghdadi rahimahullah, he would mention that, I really don't care about the test that I'm going through in my life. This is supposed to happen. If a test or difficulty comes upon my life, this is the expectation of the world. This is what I expect to happen from the world. But if something good happens, then that is the plus. That is the extra. The default has changed. Our default is everything should be good. Everything should be comfort. We teach our kids, get this career so you can live a good life and you never have any problems in your life. So you have enough money to take care of yourself and you won't have any problems in our life. We haven't raised a generation that understands that I need to be equipped mentally, physically, to handle the tests that are going to come into our life. So is there a surprise that we have such a higher degree of mental disease in the world? Because for years we've just been telling people, do this and you'll have a comfortable life. Seek this comfort, seek that comfort, do this, do that. We haven't really prepared people that, hey, you're gonna have difficulties in life. It's gonna be a struggle. But your struggle may be different than the struggle I had, but you have to be ready for your struggle. So he says, actually, any excess that's happened to my life, any ease that came into my life, that was the plus. The default was the tests. There's a classic poem that's mentioned in the commentary. It says, the intelligent person imagines in his mind that his hardships before they come upon the person. So they're waiting. They recognize that these are the places I can be tested in my life. How can I be tested in my life? And they're preparing mentally for that. It was basically قبل أن تنزيل, before it descends on the person. So if they descend suddenly, he doesn't get scared by them. He knows, okay, this happened. It was meant to happen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I prepared for this moment. I prepared my heart for this moment. The ignorant person feels his days are safe. I'm good. I'm comfortable. Nothing's going to bother me. I have enough money to take care of my family. I have a 401k that's going to keep me safe when I retire. I have enough money in the bank. I have enough food in the fridge. I'm good. Nothing's going to be a problem. And then he says he forgets that, previously he was tested. He forgets that there was a time when previously he was also tested. And then when the time comes again for him to be the person to be tested, he becomes depressed. He becomes distressed. The anxiety comes upon that person. And so there's this difference that they put between the Sadiq and the Siddiq. The Sadiq is the one who believes that this is going to happen, but they haven't internally realized that yet. The Siddiq is the one who has prepared their heart so much and gotten so ready that they understand this is going to happen. I'm waiting for the test to enter into my life, and I know this is going to be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm waiting for that moment that Allah gives me that goes back to the first hikmah, that this is going to be my shortcut to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he mentions that if you're patient with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His decree will pass and you'll be rewarded. If you are distressed and impatient, His decree will pass and you'll be burdened by sin. So the constant in this is the decree is going to pass. The qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to happen. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has meant to happen is going to happen. But then he says, if you are patient with this, if you are patient with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll get your reward. But if you are impatient with it, then that is what's going to lead to you're going to get burdened with the sin and the heaviness will come on. So it shows us, actually, yes, the difficulty itself is not what's causing us to become burdened. The problem itself is not what's causing us to become heavy. It's actually our reaction to that problem. That we don't recognize that it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or something else, and this then leads to the next hikmah. But before we do that, just quick summary, is that we shouldn't necessarily be surprised that we're going to be tested in this world. If somebody comes and tells you, man, I feel like I'm always being tested, the response to that is yes. That all of us are, and that is the whole purpose of this world and the nature of this world. So there should be no surprise there. And then we see that the world and these characteristics that it has is the test itself. One thing that comes up that we didn't entirely discuss, that sometimes the tests are divided into categories. You guys may have heard this, that sometimes people divide tests, that the reason why we're tested, the three that they say are through a punishment for an individual. The second one is an atonement for a sin that we may have committed. And the third is a means of elevation and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is you committed something wrong, we committed a sin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes you on the spot, or something for that. Maybe not on the spot, maybe a delayed punishment. So this is actually one of the reasons why, if you talk about people who have any relationship prior to marriage, that has a consequence afterwards in your marriage. It has a direct consequence, and it's something we have to deal with if somebody's in that situation. We have to tell people about that consequence in high school, and when they're in middle school, when they're in college, because it's ignored, which people think that it's just something that Islam has put as a rule, but actually it's our favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that, hey, look, this is going to be a consequence you'll have to deal with when you get married. The second is an atonement for a sin that you committed. So now you may be thinking yourself, and as I was reading this, and I asked somebody as well about it just to be sure, this isn't one or the other as a category. Okay? Say you committed a sin in your life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then punishes you for it. Okay, that's probably a reason why that trial is coming to you. But if we're still, even with that test, if we're patient with that test, that also is a shortcut to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That also is a shortcut to our tawbah being accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one thing we can do to try to fix the mistake we made with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is try to increase in our good deeds. The other is to be patient with the sin, the consequence of that sin, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then elevates your spiritual rank higher and higher and higher for every moment that you're patient with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the same thing when it comes to the nafs. Sometimes these things, they get put into a category. The nafs al-ammara, nafs al-lawama, nafs al-ammara bis-su, the nafs al-mutma'inna. These aren't necessarily like you're this or you're this or you're this. Your soul, your ruh, it oscillates between these things. That some days you could be this, then you might fall short and be lower, then you might be in a higher state, and you oscillate between these different states. So the same way when it comes to sin, regardless of the reason for the trial that you're being put through, the answer and the response is the same. Patience and recognizing that it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognizing that it's a means for us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next hikam, يخفف عالم البلاء عليك علمك بأنه سبحانه هو المبلي لك فالذي واجهك بأقداره هو الذي عودك حسن اختياره. To soften for you the suffering of affliction, He has taught you that He is the one who causes the trials to come upon you. For the one who confronts you with His decree of fate is the same one who has accustomed you to His good choice. So we'll do this one a little bit quicker because it's already 3 o'clock. What he's saying is, do you remember those moments of joy? Do you remember those moments of happiness? Do you remember those moments where there was a smile on your face? Do you remember those moments when you really wanted something and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to you? Who gave it to you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to you. So the same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave you all that joy in your life is the same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is putting you in this, but you just have to this trial, but you also just have to recognize that this is also the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's saying that what that does to an individual, once they recognize that, who is giving me this test? Who is the one who is giving me this reprimand? So when you have a child and the parent is so good to the child. They give them everything that they want, they're happy with them, they're good to them, they're kind to them, they shower them with love. But then the child does something wrong and the parent says, no, you got to fix this. They reprimand them a little bit. They scold them a little bit. They discipline them a little bit. They're not doing it out of their anger for that specific person, hopefully, inshallah. It's to get them to rectify the mistake that they had made. Or to get them to rectify or to test them for something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He puts us that, He's saying, يُخَفِّفُ, that the reason why this is lightened for you, for the slave, when they see this, is they become so obsessed and engrossed in recognizing that Allah loves them so much. That Allah is just there with them, present with them, that even when He gives me some difficulty, He's my Allah. And I know that He's doing it for my betterment. We'll skip to just this one story of Imran bin Hussein. Imran bin Hussein, he had a specific disease that some have. There's kind of a difference in what the medical term related to what he actually had was in history, but the most common thing seems to be he had a very severe edema, which means his body was just very filled with fluid. He couldn't move around. He was basically bedridden, and somebody came and looked at him and they started crying, and he said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Look at you in your state. You're one of the beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't see you in this condition." And he says, there's no need for you to cry, because For I love, and he's saying this deeply, I love what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put me in, the situation that He's put me in. And I recognize that this is something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to promise me that you're not going to tell anybody about this until I die. You can't tell anybody. So now we're getting this statement after he has passed away. He said, indeed, the angels visit me and talk to me and befriend me. Because of the patience, because of the situation that I have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested me with such a severe difficulty, but because of His recognition that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed him to befriend the angels. So the same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's testing us, is the same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who can provide you immense comfort through that difficulty. He wasn't saying he wasn't saying the actual trial itself gets better. The trial gets easier. He's saying you in your side, the pain of all of that becomes easier to deal with because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easier for you to deal with. So the tests are going to come into our life, the issues are going to come into life, the problems are going to come into our life. But if we see them as shortcuts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then actually it really makes it easier to attain many, many higher spiritual stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean that it gets easier. It doesn't mean that tests are not difficult, that it hurts. It physically can be painful. Sickness can be physically painful. The issues that you're going with can drown you a little bit, can make you feel weak a little bit. But when you recognize that it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is He, the one who loves me, is putting me through this. He is going to take me to the next level in my spiritual state. He's going to bring me closer to Him. And if the whole purpose of us trying to do all of this, all of our fasting, all of our i'tikaf, was to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can be patient with one test and it gives us the same result, this is the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we just recognize that these tests are rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah.